Hi, it's Katrina. Lohagad Fort. In India's Maharashtra state, there is a hill fort that sits nearly 3,400 feet above sea level. Known as Lohagad Fort, it dates at least as far back as the 1st or 2nd century BC, based on an inscription discovered in 2019. Since then, it's passed through the hands of several dynasties, at times functioning as both a living space and a treasury for storing valuables. Inscriptions found at the site suggest that Lohagad's origins are rooted in Jainism, a religion dating back to the 6th century BC. For the majority of its use, the fort was under the control of the Maratha Empire. It was also occupied by the Mughal Empire for 5 years. Several other dynasties ruled Lohagad for short periods as well. Everybody wanted it. The fort is located in the Western Ghats mountain range, which is considered one of India's most lush and biodiverse regions. In addition to Lohagad Fort, it's home to at least 325 globally threatened species. This incredible ancient fort now watches over this vast array of wildlife. The mountains moderate the surrounding area's tropical climate and represent one of the most telling examples of a geological feature influencing the monsoon cycle. Lost Sun Temple. In 1898, archaeologists discovered the Sun Temple of the 5th dynasty Egyptian king Nayusera, just south of Cairo. It wasn't until late last year that they uncovered evidence that Nayusera's temple was built on top of another, older Sun Temple dating as far back as the 25th century BC. Excavation co-director Massimiliano Nuzzolo explained that previous archaeology teams had assumed that the older construction simply represented an early building phase of Nayusera's temple. But it appears as though the older construction represents an entirely different building than the one that sits on top of it. This much is clear based on inscriptions naming kings who ruled before Nayusera, along with the remnants of 2 limestone columns and other architectural features. The first temple was made entirely from mud bricks, and the team found dozens of beer jars that were still intact. They date back to 1 or 2 generations before Nayusera was born. He ritually destroyed the mud brick temple to make room for the one that was built over it in his honor. The temple to Nayusera and others were dedicated to the sun god Ra. They were used as platforms for legitimizing a king's rule as the son of Ra. Nuzzolo described Nayusera's temple as a place that was used for the deification of the king. In other words, to treat him like a god. It was similar in layout to the temple that stood before it, but was larger and made of stone. Only a few sun temples have been excavated. Historical sources indicate that there may be as many as 6, and that they are all in or near the Abu Ghurab dig site where Nayusera's temple was uncovered. World War II POW Camp. Archaeologists in Oswestry, England, near the Welsh border, recently uncovered evidence of a World War II prisoner of war camp. The site, which once housed as many as 2,000 German POWs, consisted of several barracks scattered throughout a sports field and surrounded by farmland. Evidence suggests that the site operated from 1940 until 1948, 3 years after the war ended. Excavation leader John Winfer said that the conditions seemed relatively comfortable, all things considered. The camp had electricity, and the inmates had access to hot showers. There were sports games, musical performances, and jobs, including carpentry, as well as a school that the younger inmates could attend. Of course, not surprisingly, the camp's overseers enjoyed much nicer and more spacious accommodations. The living conditions that both the overseers and the prisoners experienced are pretty surprising to archaeologists, who expected to encounter evidence of a much grimmer scenario. But life there wasn't exactly like summer camp either. The team found signs of violence having occurred, as well as breakouts and civil unrest. They also found a German soldier's dog tag and are hoping to learn about the man's life by tracing the serial number. By continuing to study the site, they also hope to gain a clearer picture of what daily life was like for inmates and those who ran the camp. Small Rome Military Camp. Speaking of military camps, the Slovakian capital of Bratislava is home to a Roman military camp described by experts as a small Rome. Known as the Gerulata site, it dates back between the 1st and 4th centuries. It was part of the Limes Romanus, or Roman border. Located roughly a 20-minute drive from the city center, it was situated along a 3,000-kilometer boundary that spanned 3 continents at its peak, including Europe, Africa, and Asia. Gerulata helped to protect the eastern region of Rome's Pannonia province. Today, the designated UNESCO World Heritage Site consists mostly of the foundations of ancient buildings. During its heyday, the site contained civilian settlements, a military camp, watchtowers, 4 burial grounds, farms, and possibly even a port. Archaeologists found a wealth of artifacts, including coins, ceramic fragments, everyday objects made from bronze and iron, amber beads, and bone jewelry at the site. The team also found a damaged Roman officer's helmet, which likely belonged to an officer who was killed in a war against the Marcomannic tribe. This little-known yet major site lost its Roman influence during the 5th century with the invasions of Attila the Hun and the migration of Slavic peoples to the area. It's possible that the last Romans to live at Gerulata traded with early Slavic tribes, but their interactions were limited and short-lived, and the site was ultimately abandoned. Maggies Wall. On the outskirts of the small Scottish village of Dunning, there is a 20-foot-high pile of stones topped by a cross and gifts from visitors, including pennies, feathers, shells, stuffed animals, and tea candles. Written on the stones in white lettering is the statement, "Maggie Wall burnt here in 1657 as a witch." At first glance, the idea of someone being burned at the stake for witchcraft makes a lot of sense. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, nearly 4,000 Scottish residents were accused of witchcraft. Most of them were women. An estimated 1,500 people died as a consequence of these allegations. But the historical record contains no traces of a woman named Maggie Wall being executed during a witch hunt. Even more strangely, the monument didn't appear until 1866. The surrounding forest has gone by the name of Maggie Wall's Wood since 1829. But it still doesn't explain the lack of evidence pointing toward Maggie's existence and execution. It's possible that Maggie Wall was a real person whose records failed to survive into modern times. According to local legend, a member of a powerful family called the Rollos may have had an affair with Maggie and built the monument out of guilt. Some believe that Maggie was singled out and punished as a member of a group of women who attacked officials in an attempt to elect a new local minister. It's the only monument of its kind, leading others to speculate that it was built in memory of all Scotland's accused witches who were murdered. But nobody knows for sure. And as things currently stand, your guess is as good as mine. What do you think? Was Maggie Wall's story lost to history? Was she really a witch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. A shared cave. Until recently, experts believed that the Neanderthals in Europe died out around 40,000 years ago, just 5,000 years after modern humans arrived, and that the two groups had no contact with each other. A new study challenging these finds claims that our species, Homo sapiens, entered Europe around 54,000 years ago, much earlier than previously thought. They not only lived alongside the Neanderthals, they took turns living in the Mandarin Cave of southern France's Rhône region. In the words of prehistory expert Michael Petraglia, these findings have major implications for understanding the movement of modern humans out of Africa and the nature of our interactions with Neanderthals. This study is the result of over 30 years of excavation and research, which yielded hundreds of thousands of artifacts relating to both Neanderthals and humans. Included among the mix were several stone tools, or points, that early Homo sapiens used as spear tips. They resemble similar artifacts that were found in present-day Lebanon, nearly 1,900 miles away. This points toward the possibility that early humans may have traveled across the Mediterranean Sea, according to lead study author Ludovic Slimak. The team found no evidence of cultural exchanges between humans and Neanderthals, but they did detect signs that the cave changed hands between species over short time spans, including one transfer of ownership that took place over the span of about a year. Paleoanthropologist Katerina Harvati explained that while humans arrived in Europe earlier than originally thought, they didn't initially survive for long. They quickly died out and were replaced by Neanderthals until a later wave of Homo sapiens made their way to the continent. There's still a lot more left to learn about the migration of modern people, but this recent research adds one important piece to the puzzle. It's shout-out time! Want to say a big thank you to Big Doug and Dawn Day. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us in our little corner of the internet. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. Elite Roman Mosaic. Archaeologists in London were recently taken aback when they began uncovering a rare and well-preserved Roman mosaic near the newly built Shard Glass skyscraper. The large 2,000-year-old piece of artwork was part of a triclinium, or dining room floor inside of an upscale motel, also called a mansio. You know, like mansion. It was in places like this that high-ranking officials and their guests could enjoy fine dining, entertainment, and overnight accommodations. According to the team, the room would have been vividly painted and filled with dining couches, showcasing the floor mosaic that is just now being revealed to the world for the first time in centuries. Consisting of 2 panels, it's the largest Roman-era mosaic to be discovered in London in at least a half-century. The largest of the 2 panels likely dates back to the 2nd or 3rd century. Archaeologist Dr. David Neal took a look at the piece and traced it to a team of mosaicists known as the Acanthus Group. They had their own unique local style, which they've become recognized for even in a historical context. Next door to the mansion, there was once another large Roman building. It was probably the residence of a wealthy family. Items including coins, jewelry, and decorated hairpins were all found at the site. They likely belonged to rich residents and visitors, and are a testament to the vast wealth that many privileged Roman citizens enjoyed. In 43 AD, the Romans invaded England and established Londinium. It became Roman Britain's largest settlement and was also an important port city. Londinium's population peaked at somewhere between 45,000 and 60,000 residents. Parts of the city are still visible today, including a section of Londinium's wall and parts of the amphitheater. Desert Shrine. While excavating a Neolithic campsite in a desert in Jordan, archaeologists found a shrine dating back 9,000 years ago. They discovered the ritual complex near large ancient animal traps known as kites, which were used for corralling wild gazelles for slaughter. Archaeologist Wael Abu Aziza described the site's uniqueness, particularly its remarkably preserved state. The shrine consisted of 2 standing stones bearing inscriptions of anthropomorphic figures, along with a hearth, altar, and a miniature representation of a gazelle trap. It's a major discovery that helps to shed light on the symbolism and culture of little-known Neolithic populations. Because the shrine is so close to the traps, experts believe that the people who lived here were specialized hunters, and that the traps played a major role in their lives. Known to the local Bedouins as the works of the old men, the stone structures have been found in Jordan, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. And while their exact connection to the shrine is unclear, it seems evident that a single population built both. Unique ancient burials. Last summer, workers in southwestern Siberia discovered numerous burial sites while performing routine road and rail work. Researchers excavated several of the graves in the Republic of Khakassia and found that they all dated back to the Bronze Age. The graves included the remains of several women who were laid to rest wearing their finest clothing and jewelry. Surprisingly, the burials were found untouched by looters and mostly undamaged by the elements. Experts traced the graves to the ancient Karasuk culture, which encompassed numerous semi-nomadic groups who moved from place to place with their sheep, cattle, and horses. They also farmed during the summer. The burials date back between 3,500 years ago until the 9th or 8th century BC. They contained grave goods such as pottery, meat, and knives bearing carvings of animal heads. It's possible that the knives reached Russia's Far East via the nomadic tribes that made them, or they ended up there through trade. Finding ancient settlements in Siberia is tricky because many, if not most of them, blend seamlessly into the landscape. In other words, someone has to be really looking in order to spot one. The Karasuks buried their dead inside sandstone enclosures that housed as many as 15 graves. As the deceased were laid to rest, the enclosure was filled and another was built next to it. The most important family member was usually buried in the middle of the pit and surrounded by the graves of others. Children were buried outside the enclosure. Sometimes bodies were placed directly into the soil, but they were also sometimes buried in box graves. This ancient culture also buried their pet dogs along with them. Huge Roman settlement. For the past year, archaeologists in Aylesbury, England, have been excavating a 2,000-year-old Roman settlement and cemetery, which sits along an ancient road called Aikman Street. They unearthed the remains of 425 people, including around 40 headless skeletons. Many of the decapitated bodies were buried with the person's head between their legs or by their feet. It's possible that the beheaded individuals were social outcasts or criminally accused, but researchers think that decapitation may have also been a normal, but not very common practice in the Roman world. Additionally, the team found evidence of cremation, which was also a rare burial practice. The cemetery appears to be divided into two sections, indicating that people may have been grouped based on ethnicity, family, or tribe. Based on the number of remains, archaeologists believe that the town saw a sudden influx of residents during the mid to late Roman period, most likely due to increased farming. They expect to learn much more as they continue to carry out their research. Mount Hekla. Mount Hekla is a truly enormous stratovolcano in the country of Iceland. It stands 4,891 feet tall and was once believed to be the gateway to hell. This shouldn't be all that surprising considering just how truly horrible an eruption from this volcano can be. Toxic gas, hot ash, fiery lava, and great balls of fire burst from the top. When it erupted in the year 1104, the Vikings living in Iceland thought hell was literally overflowing and the world was ending. A poem from just after the explosion described Mount Hekla as the eternal prison of Judas. Later on, in the 16th century, German writer Caspar Putzer wrote that the entrance to hell was located within the bottomless abyss inside the mouth of Mount Hekla. As you can tell, the mountain was viewed as a very powerful place to the ancient people in Iceland. It was powerful and completely evil. Birds seen flying around the volcano were thought to be the lost souls of bad people or demons. Locals believed witches gathered around the base of the volcano to plot and scheme with the devil. It had a pretty bad reputation. The fact the mountain has erupted about 20 times over the past 1,000 years probably has something to do with it. Few things are as impressive, powerful, and fearsome as an active volcano. Temple of the Magic Square. Archaeologists in India have found a very strange inscription left on the pillar of an old temple. It's been described as a magic square puzzle, a Sudoku-like numbers game. Any Sudoku fans out there? When the numbers on the square are added in any direction, they always equal 15. That's the number that happens to be associated with the deity of the temple. The discovery was made while researchers were trying to repair the pillars of the 13th century structure in Palani. It was once used for public rituals, but is now abandoned and close to falling over. The inscription had been hidden under coatings of limestone, written hundreds of years after the temple was first built. Researchers think it was probably put on the temple pillar in the 17th century. The numbers almost definitely have something to do with the Hindu god of war, Lord Muruga. In Hindu mythology, every god has a number. Lord Muruga's number is 15. It's believed that during ancient festivals, the magic square was used as a kind of parlor trick for attendees. No matter which way they added the numbers in the grids, they always came up with 15. It wasn't the temple itself that had any real power, but the use of numbers that would have really wowed everyone. It was tricks like this that made praying at temples a much more immersive and believable experience in ancient times. Do you like playing number games? Let me know in the comments below. Old New Synagogue. You've undoubtedly heard the term golem somewhere during your life. A golem is usually a large creature in a fantasy world built from solid stone. But the real golem got its start in Jewish folklore. It was a supernatural beast that plagued the alleyways and dark recesses of the Jewish ghetto in Prague. It came from a place called the Old New Synagogue, which dates back to the later part of the 13th century. It was once the main house of worship for the Jewish community in Prague. Even today, it's one of the oldest and most notorious Gothic buildings in the city. The synagogue is also a place of great power. It was in this very building where Rabbi Lowe, if the stories are to be believed, created the golem. Legend has it Rabbi Lowe was trying to keep the Jewish people of the city safe during the reign of some pretty mean and unpredictable rulers living in the castle. He used the 4 main natural elements as raw power to mold the golem out of a block of mud. The rabbi then brought the golem to life by placing a shem, a clay tablet inscribed with the name of God, into its mouth. The golem did its job protecting the Jews of Prague until the rabbi made a mistake. He forgot to deactivate his creation on the Sabbath, and the golem went wild and stormed through the city, destroying everything. And while none of this probably happened, the Old New Synagogue is still considered a place of great power in Prague. And yes, Rabbi Lowe was a real historical figure. He was a Jewish scholar and is currently buried in Prague's Old Jewish Cemetery. Fengdu Ghost City. In Chinese, Fengdu translates roughly to the city of ghosts. This mysterious place can be found at the northern part of the Yangtze River and is the hub of all things paranormal and spooky in Chinese culture. The city of Fengdu dates back about 2,000 years to around 200 BC, when the Han Dynasty was still in power. Legend has it that two military officials, one named Yin and one named Wang, abandoned their posts and ran away. They put down the first building blocks of the city, and it grew and prospered from there. But the truth is that not much is known about the city's early history. We know that at some point, Fengdu became known across the country as the place where the devil lives. Tianzi, the king of the dead, supposedly lorded over the city as well. These crazy rumors fueled a boom in tombs and crypts being built throughout the city. It became a massive burial ground and is still, to this day, one of the largest mass graveyards in all of China. But there are more than just burials in Fengdu. There are also dozens and dozens of temples, statues of demons and ghost kings, and paintings of people in various states of suffering. All things told, this may be the one place in China that is most connected to the land of the dead. It has 2,000 years of creepy history, with many locals still believing it's filled with ghosts and the spirits of demons. It's shout-out time! Want to say a big thank you to AJF and Thunder Raider. Thanks so much for watching and hanging out with us. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. The Fertility Temple. The sacred Chimi Lakang Monastery in Bhutan is associated with more than just the general Buddhist principles of serenity and peace. It's also a fertility temple, originally built in the 15th century and blessed by the old Buddhist leader Drukpa Kunli, also known as the Divine Madman. Some even called him the Saint of 5,000 Women. He worked tirelessly to spread enlightenment of a more physical nature. Because of him, phallic symbols can be found all throughout Bhutan. They can also be found all throughout this temple. It's home to dozens of stone and wooden phallus decorations. Even the monks have special talismans shaped like the male reproductive organ that they use to bless women who wish to be fertile. After this monastery was built, the use of such symbols became more acceptable in Bhutan. He became legendary, with locals believing he could turn demons into protective spirits by bopping them on their head with a giant wooden phallus, which he called the Thunderbolt of Flaming Wisdom. In modern Bhutan, the use of such symbols is much more frowned upon than it used to be, but the Fertility Temple remains standing as a powerful place. It's visited by people all over the world looking for the blessing of the Divine Madman and his Thunderbolt of Flaming Wisdom. Helike, the Real Atlantis. The ancient city of Helike was located on the southwest shore of the Gulf of Corinth on the Peloponnese Peninsula. By the time the ancient Greek writer Homer mentioned the settlement in the 4th century BC, it was already ancient. It has probably been around for at least 3,000 years, if not more. For the Greeks, Helike was a place of great religious importance. There was a sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon in the city, which attracted pilgrims from all over the region. Historians believe the Temple of Poseidon was the second most important religious place in all of classical Greece, next only to the Sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. Alas, the city met its end in 373 BC. That was when an earthquake struck and triggered something known as soil liquefaction. The soil underneath the city was saturated with water. It lost its strength and it turned to liquid. The entire city sank, and the ocean level rose to cover it. There were no survivors, nothing left. Within just an hour, the entire city was literally buried, gone under the waves. After the fact, historians wrote the disaster wasn't caused by a simple act of nature, but rather by an act of vengeance from the god Poseidon. This matches up with the tale of Atlantis and its sinking. There are many people out there who believe Helike was the real inspiration for the lost city of Atlantis. The city was destroyed at around the same time Atlantis was supposed to be destroyed, and a vengeful god was to blame. It actually makes more sense than almost every other Atlantis theory out there. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. City of Rituals. The fortress of Vilars de Arbeca in Spain is an old ruin that dates back to the 8th century BC. It's a small and very ancient town that's become something of a puzzle for archaeologists because of its design. It seems to have been built by a modern military engineer. It has a circular wall over 15 feet wide and was once flanked by 12 massive towers. It had a water cistern, a flood moat over 45 feet wide, and was really quite the impregnable fortress for its time. But here's the strange part about the fortress. The inhabitants built imposing towers, strong walls, and roads leading from building to building, but they also had a strange obsession with rituals. Archaeological excavations have revealed things not found in any other ancient settlements in Spain. For example, they once discovered the burial of a horse fetus underneath the floor of a house. Nobody knows exactly what the people here were doing, but they definitely had some unusual beliefs. This was likely a place of great power during the days of the Iberians, but archaeological evidence has left us with more questions than answers. Mount Kailash. Mount Kailash is the most sacred mountain in all the Himalayas. Some call it the Stairway to Heaven, a great peak of ice and snow that stands 22,000 feet above the Tibetan Plateau. For both Hindus and Buddhists, Mount Kailash is considered the physical embodiment of Mount Meru, the center of the universe and the very axis of the world. The mountain is said to be dotted with mysterious monasteries and caves where unknown holy men reside in total seclusion, never seen by people of the outside world. Pilgrims travel to the base of the mountain every year as part of a pilgrimage, but nobody has ever actually been able to climb to the summit. Not a single human being has ever stood on the peak of Mount Kailash, which makes its legend so much more believable to those who have faith in them. Reaching the peak is considered a forbidden act among Hindus because they still believe divine entities live at its top. If a Hindu were to reach the peak of the mountain, they would be trespassing on holy ground, disturbing the divine energy that rests there. In Tibetan mythology, there was only one person who ever reached the top. He was a monk by the name of Milarepa, but when he returned to the folks at the bottom, he warned everyone to never go up to the peak or they would bother God. Finally, it's said that as you get nearer and nearer to the top of the mountain, you begin aging faster. Even tourists who venture to the base of the mountain claim that their hair and fingernails begin growing at an extraordinary rate. The Hill of Ward. Ireland's Hill of Ward was once considered a place of great and terrible power. Irish archaeologists recently digging on the hill, what is today a literal hill of dirt and grass, discovered evidence of burning. They found proof dating back to the year 500 that there were significant fires lit on top of this hill. This has led them to speculate that the Hill of Ward may have been the place where the very first Halloween bonfire was lit. There have been all kinds of places in Ireland credited with being the original site of Halloween. The ancient festival of Samhain, where Halloween comes from, was celebrated everywhere on the island, so this isn't really a huge surprise. The truth is that nobody knows where the very first Halloween bonfire was lit, but we do know the Hill of Ward was one of the main places for the celebration. On October 31st, as the sun set over Ireland, Druids built great fires on the hill. They believed the veil between our world and the land of the dead was at its thinnest at that time. Sure, October 31st also marks the end of the harvest season, but on the Hill of Ward, it was a time when people believed they could reach through the veil and into the realm of spirits. The Elves of Iceland. In Iceland, there is still an unusually large group of people who believe elves are real. They call the elves Huldafolk, or the hidden people. It's believed that in the great lava fields north of Reykjavik, the supernatural forces of the old world are still alive and thriving. These hidden people, the ancient Icelandic elves, are said to live under giant boulders and pieces of stone that litter the landscape 8,000 years old. The terrain is barren, it's plagued by howling winds and the occasional fiery eruption. You can probably understand why it was considered a place of amazing power thousands of years ago. And yet, according to The Guardian, about half the local population still believes there is an entire parallel community living out there. Just beyond the last suburbs of the Icelandic capital, there is, according to about 50% of Icelanders, a mirror world of elves, dwarves, and even ghosts. Some people even claim to be able to see them. Over the past few years, there has been a lot of problems in Iceland with development. Roads are being built, infrastructure is going up, and the world of the elves is being torn apart. In 2012, Ragnhildur Jonsdottir said the elves contacted him personally to protect their sacred land. He is now the unofficial spokesperson for the elves, trying to keep the construction crews away from the lava field. He even teamed up with a group of environmentalists to campaign against any new development. But the development is still ongoing. Whether or not the elves of ancient times are still living out there in a kind of ethereal dimension, nobody really knows. But in a few years, the landscape might be gone anyway, turned into highways, shopping centers, and hotels for tourists. Heraklion. The discovery of the lost Egyptian city of Heraklion is arguably one of the most amazing of the last 2 decades. It was found in 2001 by Frank Gaudio with help from the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology. Since its original discovery off the coast of Alexandria, it's been yielding non-stop secrets. Heraklion was once the largest and most important port city in all of Egypt. Dating back to as early as the 12th century BC, Heraklion was destroyed 2,000 years ago, near the end of the 2nd century BC. What happened is a bit of a mystery, but it likely had to do with a great tsunami that caused sea levels to rise. It happened over a brief period of time, with the city gradually flooding until the whole thing crumbled into the Mediterranean. Ever since, it's been hiding beneath the water's surface, just off the coast. Ever since excavations began in 2001, archaeologists have found great statues, broken ships, the remains of temples, objects from daily life, and huge blocks of shattered stone. Many of these treasures have been brought to the surface, such as a huge red granite statue of the god of fertility, Happy, and a massive bronze statue of Osiris. Archaeologists even found a fruit basket from 2,400 years ago with the fruit still in it. Genie Lamp. A very real genie lamp has been discovered by archaeologists in Israel. It's a bronze oil lamp shaped like a face, found in the City of David National Park. According to archaeologists Ari Levy and Dr. Yuval Baruch, the lamp was intentionally buried underneath the foundations of a building to bring good fortune to the residents. It was what archaeologists call a foundation deposit, a type of offering that was typical in the ancient world. People would deposit special items in the foundations of buildings as they were being built, which were supposed to bring them good luck once their houses were complete. They could be buried under the floors, under the cornerstones, or wherever seemed appropriate. But this is the first time a genie lamp was found as an offering in Israel. It dates back to the Roman period, around the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. However, even though it's being called a genie lamp, we don't know if the people who left it beneath the structure really thought there was a genie living inside it. The truth is that in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, genies were serious business. They were called jinns. People believed they could dwell in any inanimate object, from a stone to a tree to a lamp. They possessed all kinds of powers and could ruin a person's life with their evil magic. It may very well have been that whoever left the lamp underneath the structure thought there was a jinn in it, and that by trapping it there, they would be protected from evil spirits and granted good luck. Makes sense to me. Ninja throwing stars. A bizarre collection of flattened clay balls sat in a pair of Japanese museum collections for decades until 2019. That was when Japanese archaeologist Akihiro Iwata realized they weren't ordinary stones, but extremely early ninja throwing stars, also known as shurikens. They were used by mysterious ancient ninjas during feudal Japan as deadly throwing weapons. According to Iwata, these throwing stars come from the Sengoku period of between 1467 and 1615. They were almost definitely real weapons used by a ninja, or maybe even several ninjas. While we think of these characters today as fanciful martial arts masters from kung fu movies, the truth is that ninjas were more than heroes of legend. They were masters of espionage, assassination, guerrilla warfare, and sabotage. They date all the way back to the 12th century, but it's rare that physical evidence of them is actually found. These throwing stars were excavated from 2 archaeological sites in Greater Tokyo, periodically from between 1920 and 2010. Some of them were found in the ruins of Iwatsuki Castle, but when they were first found, nobody connected them to throwing stars. They had decayed so much that they looked like flat green stones. They were found along with some clay balls that may have been caltrops. Caltrops were also ninja weapons, thrown on the floor to injure the feet of enemy soldiers or horses when they accidentally walked over them. Iwata believes the ninja artifacts probably come from the siege of Odawara, which happened in 1590. It was when 2 of the most powerful clans in Japan battled for domination, the Toyotomi and the Tokugawa. Magical girdle. Archaeologists have discovered a magical birthing girdle. Yep, that's right. But the girdle isn't what you're probably picturing in your head. It wasn't a piece of clothing strapped to a woman's abdomen to make them look thinner. It was a strip of parchment about 10 feet long and covered in Christian emblems. It was used as a magical amulet by women in the 15th century to protect them during pregnancy and to keep them safe during childbirth. The magical girdle was found in England and analyzed by experts at the University of Cambridge. They learned very quickly that the girdle had been heavily used. Many of the images and texts had been worn away by use, and it was covered in plant and animal proteins as well as human fluids. It was undoubtedly worn by many different women as they gave birth as a way to protect their babies. The Christian images on the girdle are quite interesting. There's a picture of nails, presumably from the crucifixion. Jesus' name is written on the parchment, and there is also a picture of Jesus standing with his crucifixion wounds, dripping blood from his hands. The rest of the girdle is covered in Christian prayers. Because childbirth was the leading cause of death for women in the medieval period, they believed the pictures of Christ and the Christian prayers wrapped around their bellies would protect them and their infants. Roman feast mosaic. During excavations in the ancient city of Caesarea in Turkey, archaeologists came across a mosaic nearly 2,000 years old. The mosaic shows an ancient Roman party, a festival or a banquet that may have been held before a great hunt. In the mosaic, we can see two couples sitting at the very center, some women in the corner dancing to music, a boy with bare feet climbing a fig tree, and a guy blowing on a lute. It may not seem like that great of a shindig by today's standards, but this was the Roman equivalent of going to a club on a Friday night. Really, it's a snapshot of a legendary Roman party that's managed to survive all these years, buried underneath the ruins of a once great city. The city is also quite fascinating. For centuries, it was called Kahramanmaraş, ruled by the Assyrians, the Persians, and later the Macedonians. When the city was conquered by the Romans, they changed its name to Caesarea in honor of the great Julius Caesar Augustus. It became a major hub of Roman activity and apparently a pretty wild party destination. But 1,500 years ago, a great landslide buried the city. It was truly buried, rolled over and covered in several feet of dirt. It remained hidden underground until found by archaeologists in 2007. If you could go back in time and join a rambunctious Roman party 2,000 years ago, would you? Let me know in the comments. First, want to give a big shout out to Sasha, Layla, and Teresa Strickland, who's a longtime subscriber. Thanks so much for watching. We wouldn't be here without you. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Vindolanda Tablets. The Vindolanda Tablets, also sometimes called the Vindolanda Letters, were discovered at the ancient Roman fort of Vindolanda in England. Each of the tablets is a thin piece of wood roughly the size of a postcard. Each one was used by a Roman soldier garrisoned at the fortress to write a letter home to their family on the other side of Europe. The letters were written between 85 and 130 AD. There have been plenty of other tablets like this found throughout ancient Rome, but never in such abundance as at Vindolanda. They were made from imported spruce or larch wood, smooth to make writing easier, and even scored in the center so they could be folded without the mailman reading the contents. The letters found in the fortress were written by soldiers, officers, wives, merchants, slaves, and anyone else who lived in its walls that could write. They wrote only in Latin, and they weren't very good at it. Archaeologists translating the tablets found that people used extremely poor punctuation and frequent improper spelling. It could be compared to how people today rarely use proper grammar while texting. In total, 1,300 tablets were found at Vindolanda. Why they never got delivered is still a mystery. Ancient Roman Cemetery. Workers in Gaza stumbled upon an ancient Roman cemetery 2,000 years ago. Over 20 mysterious graves were found near the shoreline of the northern Gaza Strip in the midst of constructing a housing project. The Antiquities Ministry has called it one of the most important discoveries in the past 10 years. But this should be no surprise considering how rich the history of Gaza is. It's been an important hub for multiple civilizations as far back as the days of ancient Egypt and even the Philistines from the Bible. It became part of the Roman Empire and was a busy area during the Crusades. Archaeologists have even discovered the ruins of a city once besieged by Alexander the Great, and the ruins of a different city destroyed by the Mongol invasion. In this ancient Roman cemetery, archaeologists believe there are at least 80 graves in total, yet they've only identified 20 and have only opened 2 of them. One of the graves contained the ghoulish remains of a skeleton, along with some clay jars. What the rest of the graves contain will be revealed with time. Sunken treasure. An amateur group of freedivers stumbled upon a mysterious golden treasure in 2021 at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. They were swimming along the Spanish coast when they came across coins from 1,500 years ago. It proved to be one of the largest hoards of Roman coins ever discovered. The divers, Spanish brothers-in-law César Alcalá and Luis Pardo, found the stash of gold while on vacation with their families. They had rented snorkeling equipment, never anticipating that they would find actual treasure. But they did. 53 gold coins in total, dated by archaeologists as coming from 364 to 408 AD. This was at the very end of the Roman Empire when it was in a steep decline. The coins were in such good condition that archaeologists were able to read the inscriptions on them very easily. The faces of the Roman emperors minted on the coins were also clear as day, showing emperors such as Honorius, Arcadius, Theodosius, and Valentinian I. The only thing researchers need to figure out now is how the coins ended up at the bottom of the sea. Assyrian armor. Archaeologists have uncovered an ancient piece of leather armor made in the style of the Assyrians. The armor is 2,700 years old, but it wasn't found in Assyria, it was found in China. It was discovered in 2013 in a Chinese tomb near the city of Turfan. Archaeologists have described it as a type of waistcoat made of scales. It would have been put on like an apron to cover your front, lower region, sides, and lower back. Dr. Patrick Vertman from the University of Zurich says the armor was very versatile, able to be put on quickly without someone else having to help. It was also a one-size-fits-all type deal, so soldiers didn't need to worry about straps or buckles anymore. The coolest part about the armor is that it's made from scales. The team counted 5,440 small leather scales used in crafting the armor, with 140 larger scales. All these pieces were bound together using leather laces. It would have been nearly impenetrable by arrows and would have protected the wearer from sword slashes. Primeval China. An international team of researchers have just shed light on the lifestyle of primitive people living in China 40,000 years ago. At the mysterious archaeological site of Xiama Bay, researchers found stone tools and evidence of ochre processing. Ochre was a really important color in the ancient world. It's the processing of the ochre that's really got everyone's attention. It shows the ancient people here had figured out how to extract red pigment in huge quantities. Judging by the massive powder archaeologists found on the floor of an ancient house, it's clear it was once used as part of a workshop. The ancient people here would go out and mine chunks of ochre, a natural clay found all over the world. Then they took it back to their dwelling and used stone tools to bash it into powders of different color and consistency. They used the final powdered pigments to paint with. This may not sound all that fascinating, but in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty cool. This was a new technology 40,000 years ago. It shows that people emerging from Eastern Asia and migrating into China's interior were very slowly coming up with their own technologies. It started with stone tools and crude painting instruments and evolved from there. The only bizarre thing about this is that they don't appear to have come up with any other technologies at this particular site. There was no evidence of bone tools, no use of ornaments, nothing except the sudden understanding of how to make red paint. Archaeologists argue this could mean the people here were in the middle of a colonization period. There were likely different archaic groups of humans roaming through the region, all of them with their own unique technologies and skills. It wouldn't be for many thousands of years later that the Homo sapiens dominated the world and technology really took off. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these, and I'll see you soon. Bye!